Good evening, and welcome to the Putnam Valley Board of Education Business Meeting of September 24th, 2020. Please stand and join me as we salute our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. I'd like to begin to resolve to approve the minutes of the Board of Education work session business meeting of September 10th, 2020.
Second.
Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
And that moves us right into presentations, Dr. Luft. And are we starting with the external auditors? We are. Okay. Take it away, external auditors.
So,
My name is Chris Kopp. I'm a partner with O'Connor Davies that's assigned to the district's audit. With me tonight is Colleen Harris.
can you hold on 1 second? Need to put the microphone on or pull it up. I don't know if it's both.
Both. Is that better?
Now it
Is
is.
that better?
Yes.
Sorry.
So much better. Thank you.
Okay, so I'll start again. My name is Chris Kopp. I'm the partner from O'Connor Davies that's assigned to the district's audit. With me here tonight is Colleen Harris, who is the manager on the audit. She was on site for the audit. I'd like to begin first, as I said to the audit committee, I'd like to thank the board and the administration for the cooperation during the audit. You were the first audit during the pandemic era for us that was out in the field, and we appreciate the fact that the environment that you provided us felt safe and secure, and that you did everything to make my team feel comfortable. So I really do appreciate you going the extra mile to help us out and to work with us on the audit. So again, thank you very much for that. All right, so tonight, I know you have a lot of items on your agenda, so I'll try to be as brief as possible. What we're going to do is go over the required communications that I need to make with the board. In addition, we'll look at your 2020, your 1920 results, your general fund revenues and expenditures. We'll look at your major revenue sources, provide a little 5-year comparison for you so that you can see how you're trending. We'll do the same for expenditures. We also put in a 5-year history of your fund balance so you can see over the course of the years how you've done. And then you do operate some other funds, and we'll give you a little highlight on the 1920 results of those. And then I did include a little bit of a debt service chart in there for you, just so you can see where your debt is going, knowing that you're embarking on a new capital project. So first, we'll begin with the communications. We'll talk about your responsibility as a board and as an administration. The first is you have to select and implement the appropriate accounting policies for a district of your size. You have to present your financial statements in what's known as GAAP, generally accepted accounting principles. You have to establish and maintain effective internal controls over all your transactions. You need to be in compliance with all laws, regulations, provisions of contracts, and any agreements that you have. We like to joke and say the most important one is to provide me with all the financial data so we can do the audit. And really the most important one is setting the proper tone at the top. And what we mean by that is where people can come to the board if they feel they have any issues and know that you'll address those issues however you see appropriate. Our responsibility, our deliverables, we issue an independent auditor's report. That's the 1 or 2 pages in the report that's our opinion. We're very happy to say that you received an unmodified opinion. Again, the highest level of assurance an auditing firm can provide a client. We also provide an extra classroom activities report, the required communications, which I just did, and the management letter, which are recommendations that we see based on our audit regarding procedures and other items that we looked at. We need to communicate any fraud or illegal acts that either we noticed during the audit or are reported to us. We interview different people every year just to make sure that they are comfortable talking and explaining things, and we're very happy to say that nobody brought anything forth, and we didn't find anything during our testing. We had no difficulties conducting our audit. Again, a little unique. It's a hybrid this year. We were on-site, off-site, so this year was the first year you used your portal, and everything came through a secure portal, and then we were here for the 5 days as usual. There were no uncorrected misstatements. What that means is that during the course of the audit, we may find an adjusting entry because, you guys were also the first audit and very early. I mean, most schools aren't ready for us by the time we get here, so maybe the pension system comes out after you, and we provide an adjusting entry. The administration booked all those transactions. We had no disagreements with management. So how did we do? First, please ignore the heading. I forgot to change the year 2019 to 20, but this is your 2020 results. We provide an original column. That's the budget adopted by the board way back when. The final budget after any modifications that the board sees fit during the year. Your actual results. We also have to show what are known as encumbrances. Those are purchase orders that were issued at the end of the year or during the year where it hasn't been fulfilled yet. If it was fulfilled, it would be in accounts payable, but these items remained open, so you want to roll those monies forward to the next budget year. And then we provide you with the variance with the final budget, not the adopted. So if we start in the first column, the original budget, and you go up 3 lines from the bottom, you'll see that if it was a perfect world, you would have utilized fund balance of about $2,013,000. So when you adopted your budget, you planned on drawing down fund balance of about $2 million. That number for you is made up of 4 different numbers. You had encumbrances that rolled over, as I said, from the prior year of about $500,000. You utilized, I believe the number was $800,000 of fund balance from your unappropriated, and then you drew down your reserves, $200,000 from the employee benefits reserve, which is for the accrued vacation time that you've set aside, and you also drew down from your employee retirement reserve, which is the ERS, not the teacher's retirement. So all in all, you planned on utilizing about $2 million of fund balance. During the course of the year, you made modifications to the budget, but you didn't anticipate any further use of fund balance. If you go to that third column, not only did you not utilize the $2 million, but you actually generated a surplus of $1.3 million. We'll talk about how you generated that surplus on the next few slides. And then when you go to the variance column, you'll see that from the budget, your variance is $1.9 million, which takes into account the encumbrances, because again, those are segregated in the fund balance. So how did we get there? Your revenues generated approximately $500,000 worth of surplus over the course of the year. Your largest revenue, of course, is your property tax. And when you look at the property tax, you can see that you did have a negative variance with the budget, but that's because of the current year SCARs. People come in for adjustments on their assessment, and that's the current year piece that hit revenue. You can see that your other student fees came in under budget by about $166,000, and that's because you had rented out some space to the community college, and with the shutdown of the schools and because of the pandemic, you weren't able to, they didn't run their program, so therefore you didn't receive the payment. But on your state aid, you did come in about $371,000 over budget. Most of that was on your lottery aid. You came in about $240,000 better than you had anticipated on that. And in addition to that, this number also takes into account that the state did reduce your excess cost payment by 20% and your BOCES aid by 20%. So the administration was very aggressive by booking that hold back by the state. They call it temporary, but we know state cuts aren't always temporary. So all those adjustments have been recorded. So you have many other revenues that came in over and under budget a little bit, but the bulk of the number is on these lines. Same revenues, just for comparison, you can see number one, property tax, probably the most important issue that you addressed during your budget process. You can see back in 2016, your revenue was about $35.9 million, that third line that takes into account the STAR payments. And over the last 4 budgets, you've only increased it to $37.4, about $1.5 million. So you've basically only gone up about 5% over 5 years. So you've done a very good job of managing the use of fund balance, along with managing the appearance and the need for property tax. So you should feel pretty good about that.
Could you say that one more time, please?
You've done a very good job.
I could see Jill's smile from over there.
And on your state aid, you can see that the state has increased its payments back in 2016. If you remember, they were holding back portions of school district's aid, and over time, they finally did release them, and they never made you whole, but they at least gave you your current piece, up until this year where they now took 20% of those two aides. The expense side is a little harder to pinpoint where you had savings because you do have probably 60 or 70 departments in your budget. So I tried to pick some of the bigger ones just to give you a flavor for where you came in under budget. And if you remember, you were under on the expenses by about 1.9 million. And this little schedule accounts for about 1.6 of it. So we captured most of the variances. You came in under on your general support by about 185,000. General support is everything from the operation of plant to the administration to finance to all those areas that don't fit into the realm of the direct education. And you came in about 185,000 under. The bulk of that fell in the operations and maintenance of the facility. Again, with the close down, you saved money on your electricity. Plus, I believe you also completed your solar project, and you had some savings from the solar project, which will recur every year. Teaching in the regular school came in about 203,000 under budget. Again, most of that is related to salary savings and salaries, but you also didn't expend all your supply money during the course of the year. Obviously, you weren't replacing things for a couple months. Programs for students with disabilities came in about 299,000 under budget. Again, that's a very tough area. You never know which students are going to need those services, and you have to include enough money to cover those services. And again, you came in about 300,000 under. Pupil services are broad category, again, about 300,000 under, mostly in salaries. Transportation came in about 31,000 under budget. Your state retirement system came in 215,000 under budget, and that was basically because, for a very short period of time, you got a decrease in your rate. The rates that came in for the 1920 school year, because if you remember, your year end is June, the state's retirement system is March, so you didn't know the future rates, and they actually were reduced for 1920. The unfortunate part is that the employee retirement system has a March 31st year end, and I think we all know what happened in and around March 31st is the stock market kind of hit a low for the year. So I would anticipate that you're going to see increased rates in your 2021 bill. So that's why I said short-lived savings. Probably in the past, you remember me saying you had double-digit increases in the state retirement system for years, and it finally leveled off. Well, I hope you enjoyed it. Social Security, you saved about 331,000, and the bulk of that is, again, because you saved money on salaries. When you weren't in session, you saved money on some part-times and temporary people, and so you saved about 330,000 on the Social Security line. And again, 5-year track record of those same items, just so you can see. General support, you can see, has been declining over the last 2 or 3 years. And again, I would say a lot of that is due to the utility costs. And again, probably because you're being reluctant to fill positions and you're leaving jobs vacant when they become vacant to incur some savings. Your students with programs with disabilities, you can see, is pretty constant in and around the 7.5 million mark. Transportation, I don't think anybody was surprised that that was rising for a while because the cost of transporting the children plus new routes and everything else adds every year. And Social Security obviously remains about the same, and it's based on salaries. So where does that leave you? Your fund balance. So we have 5 years of fund balance numbers here. We'll only talk about 20 unless you have some questions on the other accounts. We like to call them buckets, but you have in bold, you see non-spendable. The non-spendable for you is prepaid expenditures, again, because you're a June year end, some of the bills you pay overlap years. This is that prepaid portion of those overlaps. So part of the retirement system, part of your health insurance, so those are prepaid expenses. You have restricted, that's where the board has restricted money for future use. These restrictions are governed by state ed departments, so the usage of them follows certain guidelines. So you have a repair reserve, you have a property loss and liability, you've put away about $370,000 for that. Tax certiorari's, as I said early, you had some scars and some tax certs on the revenue side. You've put away about $550,000 to cover all those outstanding tax certiorari's. Employee benefits and accrued liabilities, that's the amount of money that you have put aside to cover when somebody retires and they get their vacation, sick time, whatever their contract calls for. So you've put away money, about $895,000 for that. ERS retirement, you've put away about $1.8 million. As I just said, that's good because you might see an increase in 2 years. So you have about $1.8 million that may help you cushion whatever increase you're facing. You've also put away for the TRS retirement. That's governed by state law. That was new last year. You put away into it. You can only do 2% of your salaries in that every year, so it's limited to that. So you've put away $800,000 in case that rises above its current level. And you've put away $1 million for your capital projects. So, as you're embarking on your capital projects, you've got taxpayer approval to use about $1 million. So you can use this to help not take on debt and not incur future interest costs. The assigned bucket is assigned by you, the board, or the administration. So what you have is purchases on order. Those are those encumbrances I spoke about earlier. That's that $1.4 million that I mentioned on the encumbrance side. Those are purchase orders that weren't fulfilled by the end of the year. The administration also, knowing that the state was possibly reducing some revenues, the state aid, they put away about $300,000 for state aid reductions. So you did put away some money to cushion just in case the state cuts you. I mean, the fact that you were able to do that is good, and the fact that you earmarked it for that probably is going to pay off dividends if the state does resume reducing some of the payments as it faces its own fiscal problems due to the pandemic. And you used $1,080,000 of your unassigned fund balance against your tax levy for the 2021 year. So again, you could have raised property tax, but you didn't. You used some of your reserve to save the taxpayers money. I think if I do the math quickly in my head, that's almost 3% that you save by using the reserves. What you have left is unassigned, $1.7 million. That's 3.36% of your following year's expenditure budget. So the state only mandates or only allows you to keep 4%. So you're right near that 4% level. And that money is used for any emergency or any future budget that you so desire. Your total general fund balance is about $2,488,000, which is up from last year's $9 million, and it's a good trend that you're seeing, and the reserves you're picking are good reserves. As I said, you do have some other small funds that you operate, and when I say small, just in comparison to your general fund. You have a debt service fund, and you have about $3.5 million in the debt service money. That money, again, is for you to appropriate and use against the debt that was borrowed. So what happens is that if you don't spend the money from a bond, or you have a capital project that doesn't expend all the money because it comes in slightly in the budget, that money is restricted for use to pay down the bond that it was applicable to. So you have about $3.5 million that you can use for future debt payments. Your capital projects budget, although it's a deficit of $2.5 million, don't panic. What happens is that you took out a $5.3 million bond anticipation note so that you could have cash for your capital project. Accounting regulations don't let you record a bond anticipation note as revenue until it's converted to permanent financing. So what happens is that your capital fund will show a deficit, but you do have the cash. It's not that you're spending cash you don't have. Your school lunch fund has about $325,000 in it. That's above the allowable amount that the state has, so you will get notified by the state that it's a little high, but I've been informed by the administration that you're utilizing a lot of that in the capital project for the cafeterias. And that's the way to use these excesses. You don't want to use them for operations because once you use them up, they're gone, and then you have to raise food prices. By using it for these one-time purchases, that's a great way to utilize any excess that you have. And then you have a small capital, special purpose fund, and this is where you have some money put aside, donations, charity, things like that for scholarships and special events. So you have about $100,000 there that's restricted for whatever use it was donated to the district for. Bonds, I think the key to you is that bottom section where it's the shows you the principal payments by year. I think you can see that your bonds will all be paid off by year 2028. Very aggressive schedule. So in 7 years, you're basically done all the outstanding debt up until your new borrowing. So by phasing in the new project and the new debt, as the old debt's retired, you're replacing it with the new debt, again, for hopefully minimal impact on your budget and its future usage. That's the quick synopsis of your fiscal year. Again, I'd like to thank Jill and the finance staff. I mean, they really went above and beyond this year helping us, and we do appreciate it, and we do appreciate the opportunity to serve the district. We always enjoy coming up here because, again, your staff is not only cooperative, but they're very knowledgeable, and it's some good conversations. And if anybody has any questions, I'd be more than happy to try to answer them.
And from what I'm hearing you say, you did meet with our audit committee prior to this meeting?
Yes,
Okay.
and I did meet with the superintendent and the finance person during the draft stage, just, make sure that everything looked correct to them, and, they explained any variances we had, and, so, again, they're very well engaged in the process.
Anybody? Any questions?
Did the audit committee have any questions or concerns, or?
The audit committee did not, and I'll be making a slight report later on.
Okay.
Okay, excellent.
All right?
All right. Well, thank you.
Again, thank you very much for your time.
Thank
We
you for letting us
appreciate
be your first test case, putting you in our hands.
We were happy to share that distinction with you and hang
In the
out.
capable hands of Jill Figueroa. I'm not at all
There you go.
surprised.
I'm glad you put us through our hoops.
Thank you.
Thanks again.
Take care. Good night.
All right. Our next presentation will be Sharon Eason from Acume Partners.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Sharon Eason. I'm a manager with Acume Partners. And similar to the team before me, I would like to thank the district for allowing us a safe environment to perform this audit. We too had to come in during COVID situations, and the district was very accommodating in not only getting us what we needed, but when we had to come into the building, made us feel very safe. So thanks to Jill and her staff for that. My role today is to talk about the internal audit of purchasing and accounts payable. The purpose of the audit was to review and assess the adequacy of the effectiveness of the internal controls over purchasing and accounts payable operations in the school district. We conducted several audit procedures, which include reviews of the different areas and interviews with key personnel members as it relates to purchasing and accounts payable. There are 3 types of ratings that can be issued over any type of internal audit, and that's the satisfactory, which is the highest, and the satisfactory audit indicates an acceptable system of internal controls, satisfactory compliance with applicable policies and procedures, and the regulatory requirements. Below that is the needs improvement, which indicates that there are some weaknesses in the systems, and these findings require management's prompt resolution to prevent further deterioration and possible losses. And below that is unsatisfactory. And an unsatisfactory rating indicates significant weaknesses in the system of the internal controls and/or the compliances as they relate to the policies and procedures. With that in mind, we are happy to report that in all the areas that we tested, the audit areas that are listed here, we were able to issue a satisfactory rating in all areas, which means that is the highest rating that we can issue as audit over internal controls. However, we had one recommendation, and the recommendation is that the district should establish a written policies and procedures to ensure that all date and time-stamped envelopes, bid opening logs, and additional documentations are properly maintained in the bid files. And I'm happy to say that once we brought this to the district's attention, Jill and her staff promptly created a written checklist as a procedure to mitigate this situation. We are also commending the district and asking them to continue in its processes and the controls over the accounts payable cash disbursements, the T&E employee disbursements, new vendors, and the claim auditing. So what we're saying is that those policies and procedures were implemented based on satisfactory standards of our audit. And that concludes my report. Do we have any questions?
Any questions? Any questions?
Everything was clear and concise. Everything was clear and concise.
Hey, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And again, I want to say thanks for the support that we received from Jill and her staff.
And we want to thank you for all the work that CUNY does for us, and the fact that I can understand these audits is a lovely thing.
It means that we try to keep it in layman's term because we know, we can get buried in the weeds. So thank you.
I do want to take this opportunity to, again, both like the auditors, thank Jill and her team, I know especially Agata. It's a tremendous amount of work that goes into the background, behind the scenes for these audits. So obviously, all the processes and procedures they have in place, and we scored as the highest rating possible. So I know a lot of thought and effort goes into those policies and procedures that get us there. So I wanted to publicly thank Jill and her team.
Okay.
Time for you, Mr. Cohen?
Yes, thank you. The audit committee met tonight before the two presentations, and then we had a separate, each one presented, the external and the internal presented to us. The audit committee is made up of Barbara Palmley, Amy Souther, and Tom Sawyer. Our first action of business was to appoint the chairperson, and Tom Sawyer is our chairperson of the audit committee for this coming year. And as you've heard tonight, we went over in detail, because we were with them for almost about an hour and 45 minutes, we were with them, and we went over both reports in gory detail, went into every little number, and the district did superb. And as Dr. Luff just said, is Ms. Figueroa and her committee just did an unbelievable job. We met every requirement, and we got the highest level ratings. And the one new area that they recommended about the documentation you heard, we've already instituted that. So we got a very strong rating, and the committee strongly supports the conclusion drawn that our district is financially in very strong shape. And again, on behalf of the district and all our citizens, we thank Jill and her team for doing a superb job.
All right. Dr. Webb?
Should I introduce myself?
Go ahead.
Always fit.
And you are?
So I will be presenting our district goals for this year. Just a quick overview of the process. We first met as a board and established a list of board goals that we, as a governing body, wanted to make sure that we met those goals for this year. Those goals were then shared with our overall administrative team, and the administrative team went through a very similar process, and I guess it's good that the goals set by the administrative team were extremely close to the goals that were set by the board as a governing body. So everybody's on the same page, and certainly as a district, we're moving all in the same direction. I do feel I'd be a little remiss if I didn't take some time to talk about last year's goal. So around this time last year, we sat in this room and we talked about our goal of promoting wellness and personal growth by accepting challenges. Had we only known the challenges we were being asked to accept, maybe we would have picked a different goal. But I couldn't be more proud of the district, our students, our community, for how we responded to those challenges and how we continue to do so as we continue this year within the same global pandemic. So for this year, what we did was we established 4 main goals. So they're sort of highlighted by the words on the top, and then some subsequent information below it. So our first goal really has to do with the student experience, and it speaks to the safety of all students and staff in the Putnam Valley School District remains our highest priority. The district is committed to the following items to support our overall student experience. And those items include making sure that students and staff are safe at school, that we're dismantling any systematic practices that do not support the inclusion of all students, that we're supporting our culture, and prioritizing the social emotional needs of our students. We're finding opportunities to promote leadership roles for our students, and we're focusing on the development of essential skills that students will need to be successful in life. Our next goal is specific to our academic program. It states our academic program is the core of our school district. The Putnam Valley School District will ensure rigor and effectiveness of our academic program by assessing the effectiveness of district initiatives, acknowledging the academic accomplishments of our students, renewing our curriculum and instructional practices, providing parents and teachers with information and training to support student learning, establish best practices to support our remote learners, and addressing lost instruction from last spring. Our third goal speaks to communications. It states open and honest communication is vital during challenging times. The Putnam Valley School District is committed to the following strategies to improve our communications. The first speaks to open dialogue. The second is an active approach toward telling our story and sharing our achievements. And the third is sharing our vision for academic success for all students. And our fourth goal speaks to continuous improvement. The Putnam Valley School District remains committed to maintaining a culture of continuous improvement by accepting challenges and identifying opportunities, maintaining a zero tolerance policy for racism while continuing to promote social justice for all, building efficient and effective systems, making sure we have a balanced and fiscally responsible budget, and promoting the professional learning opportunities that directly impact student learning. So those are our four main goals for this school year. Are there any questions?
It's not so much a question, just a general comment for the community more than anything. You listen to these goals, and it really touches you deeply, but then on top of this, you always have to remember that we're dealing in this hybrid environment right now. And it's so much harder, because we have students who are totally online, and then we have our middle school and high school students who are online basically just under half of the week. So making sure they're emotional and their heads are all together is a very difficult challenge for our teachers. And we, as a board, understand that and fully appreciate the work that Jeremy and his whole team has put forth to ensure that academically, emotionally, socially, our students are going to progress in this environment. And we don't know how long this environment's going to last. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions?
No, they're remarkably concise, given how much conversation we had, and that you were able to pull, I love the categories. I love the four headings.
Thank you.
And then the step beyond this is specific action items to each one of these bullets as far as in an operational way.
Correct. So each building and department will then go through the goals and identifying action items that are specific to their department or building and what they intend to do to meet those goals.
Okay. So we're adopting them today?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All righty.
So sorry, it's me again. I just changed sheets. I'll let Maureen open up the presentation. Yep.
Jeremy, you don't really adopt
Yep.
Yeah, there's no motion, just so you know that.
Okay. Sorry. So we have two policies we're going to review this evening. The first is our information and data privacy. This is all related to Ed Law 2D. So as many are aware, the state passed the Ed Law 2D, which really focuses on student privacy and protection of personally identifiable information. So we're using a template constructed by the New York State School Board Association. And just to provide some of the highlights, it addresses protection of personally identifiable information, procedures are related to data security and data privacy, and breach notifications. So this plan was previously, I think, last updated in 2013. It was one paragraph, and obviously there's been a much greater focus on protection of personally identifiable information over the past few years. So this policy was updated to reflect those changes at the state level. Any questions about this one?
I do.
No, it's pretty
Okay.
straightforward.
Did you switch already? You still scrolling? Here, we're done. That one. So the next policy we're going to speak about is our code of conduct. I can read that from here.
I cannot, and I just went to the doctor.
Excellent. All right, so I'll cover some of the highlights of the code of conduct. You can see the changes are actually tracked in red on the actual document. So a lot of the updates of this were really in response to our current global pandemic. Obviously, the code of conduct was not written with any mention of distance learning or face coverings or any of the other good stuff that we're living with. So we want to make sure that we updated the policy to reflect what our current practices are. So some of those additions or changes include including the use of face coverings, which in the old policy were prohibited. That would be an unusual stance to make nowadays. So we had to put a clause in there that allowed for face coverings to be worn in school without breaking the rules. We updated many different provisions of the code of conduct to include that those provisions are still in effect during distance learning or remote learning. So in terms of recording the teacher and many of the other discipline items that can arise within class, those same rules apply to students participating in distance learning, so those were updated. So some of those include, I said, recording and videotaping. We expanded the definition of district property to make sure that we include buses and other events or times when students are on property. We added a clause that made everyone responsible for following the public health guidelines. So now social distancing and facial coverings and all those things are now part of our code of conduct. There's nothing specific to COVID. We certainly hope there is not another global pandemic, but if there is, our code of conduct will be ready to go. And then we added some other provisions. One, this was a recommendation by our attorneys. We had to add a clause about giving false statements. There's another one, some updating we did regarding pronouns and removing references to he or she. And we clarified other additional language, we gave our administrative team an opportunity and the board an opportunity to look through it and sort of say, is there anything else that doesn't look right, stands out, you think we should change? So you'll see some minor, more grammatical type changes throughout the document, just to make it more current. Any questions about our code of conduct?
This will be placed on the website as of tomorrow for a 30-day public review.
Okay.
It won't come before you again for 30 days.
Okay, perfect. Because I was actually going to ask about how are we going to communicate the changes to the code of conduct. So.
Yeah, so to be posted for public comment for 30 days before we can adopt it.
And it raised a question to me, and it's probably not related, well, it's related but not part of the policy. Are our teachers recording any part of their Zooms to be able to help children with repetitive learning or
Mm-hmm.
whatever's that happening?
So some teachers have the ability to record
Yeah.
their lessons. They have to make sure if they are recording, that there's certain assurances that
Right, that they tell everybody's
yeah,
aware
it's
of
focused
it.
on them or the board, or they're sharing their screen, that
Okay.
they're not identifying other students.
Right.
So there's certainly, back to the first policy, some personal protection piece to it. But there are some teachers that are recording and then posting their lessons. But I think overall, our attendance has been very positive, and the students, both in person and remote, have been participating during the actual instruction.
Okay. Great.
Any other questions about the code of conduct? Okay,
No,
thank you.
thank you.
We should probably mix these up next time. We had audit,
Policy.
policy.
That's okay, you can.
Just get them all out of the way, it's fine.
It's the way we file for it. It's fine. I do think it's hysterical that we now have to say you must wear face coverings, when we used to say you cannot wear face coverings. God. Okay.
Hey, look whose turn it is.
Look whose turn it is. Go, just keep talking and present us with your superintendent's report.
About the policy, are you okay with waiving the second reading of the data privacy policy tonight, so that it's in effect as of tomorrow?
Tomorrow.
I am.
It's on the
Yeah.
agenda that way, it's not confirmed.
Yes.
All right, so for my superintendent's update, I'm going to just give a quick sort of overview on the opening of schools. Staffing, as many have heard, staffing was an issue across the region. We have successfully filled all of our short-term positions, with a few exceptions. So one exception is a high school special education teacher, and the other one is a middle school world language teacher. So if anybody out there knows people certified in those areas, send them our way. From a facilities standpoint, we continue our routine cleanings throughout the day and into the evening as we monitor our PPE and cleaning supplies. I was in Mr. Spittle's office the other day. It looks a little bit like an Amazon warehouse, with labels all over it, boxes full of PPE. So I'm sure he didn't imagine that being part of the job, but we're well stocked with the things we need, and will remain that way. From instructional standpoint, we did end up splitting 3 sections at the elementary school. Those 2 sections in 4th grade and 1 section in 1st grade. We have some fantastic teaching assistants that are supporting those split classes. Not that we'll mention who any of them are here today. But I'm sure it's a work in progress. I know the teachers and teaching assistants that are supporting those split classrooms are working very closely together. But it seems to be very successful so far. The remaining classes are split between the in-person and remote learners. So we don't have any remote learners within the split classes, because that just seemed totally unfair to have to split your class into and teach remote learners. So the remote learners are split between the other classes across all the grade levels. Health screenings are monitored on a daily basis for any employee or student who responds yes to any question. They're almost immediately contacted. Dr. Doherty is the primary contact for our staff in the buildings, and our school nurses are the primary contacts for the students. So they've shifted their days where they begin earlier, and they're able to start calling students as soon as there's any responses. Luckily, the yes responses have thus far been almost entirely accidental, just someone clicking yes by accident. But we are continuing to monitor those. We're actually started a process of auditing who is completing them and calling families who did not successfully complete them for students. We have been doing that for faculty and staff from the beginning. So it's a little update on the health screening. Just to cover some of our successes, I think students and staff remain excited to be back in school and participating in in-person learning. I think our remote learners, the feedback we received so far has been extremely positive from the families of our remote learners. I know one of our greatest fears for anyone who sat on the Reentry Task Force, we were really concerned about a student's ability to wear a mask for the entirety of the day, especially some of our youngest students. And I have to say, out of everything, what's probably amazed me the most is how compliant our students are to wearing their masks. And they may not realize it, and I shouldn't give away my secret, but when they go out to recess, they walk right by the corner of the district office where my window is. So they don't know I'm watching, but I'm always out there watching. And it could be 25 kids in a line, and number 25 is the furthest from the assistant or the aide that's out there with them. And they're walking in line, and every one of those, even our youngest students, has their mask on. They're not fidgeting with them, they're not taking them off, they're not hitting each other with them, they're not trading them, they're not. So it's been we were really worried about 4 and 5-year-olds' abilities to keep a mask on. And I have to say, and I hope my colleagues would say the same, that it's been really impressive to see how well the students have done in a very unusual learning environment. There's, of course, some challenges as well. Finding an instructional balance between in-person and remote learners remains probably our primary challenge. That's certainly not a Putnam Valley challenge. That is a statewide challenge for districts for asking teachers to support both in-person and remote learners simultaneously. Nobody's ever done it before, so our teachers are really working through it. They're sharing best practices, and they're revising each day to make sure that they get something that works for everyone. We're still working on the best way to provide feedback and assessments of our remote learners. And we're still working with our nursing staff on the management of non-COVID health symptoms, along with possible COVID-related symptoms. So when does a student go home? When do they not? When is a runny nose just a runny nose? When is it more? And those are obviously the challenges that our nurses are dealing with on a daily basis. We actually met with all 3 of them this afternoon just to sort of answer any questions and problem solve together. We would be lost as a district if it was not for their support. I can't imagine how many hours they spend thinking about work when they're not physically here. But we really all owe them a great bit of gratitude for the work they do every day to support our students in a typical year, and then tenfold in a year like this one. Just a quick facilities update, twofold on the construction project side. Everyone has probably seen from the road, the Health and Wellness Center sort of goes through spurts. As materials arrive, crews come and quickly put up sections, and then we're left waiting for the next materials to arrive. A lot of this just goes back to closures related to COVID, manufacturers shut down, warehouses shipping, and they're still trying to catch up as they work their way through the queues. So we still remain on target to have that building done for our estimated completion, which was the beginning of the new year. So as you drive by, again, you'll see work happening as we finish up. As I mentioned last meeting, we were very excited to be able to open the middle school. It was not for lack of effort. As I mentioned before, many of our construction workers, as well as our own staff, worked through the Labor Day weekend, some days past midnight, to get that building up and running. It's still not complete, but the construction crews are in their second shift, and on Mondays when there's no students, completing their final items. But again, it's a feat to have gotten it done, and I know just the students' faces and how excited they are to walk in there. And I know a former teacher who had come back recently walked in and was essentially lost. Like you almost need to orient yourself, like where was this or what was this? So it's we welcome the day when we can welcome the community in there and to really celebrate this spaces as they're meant to be. We have individual student desks in the cafeteria and the library spread 6 feet apart. That certainly was not our furniture vision for those spaces, but hopefully one day soon those spaces will realize their true purpose, and we'll be able to invite our community in to check them out. The other update just has to follow up on something that we shared recently. Just a reminder that the track and the wellness trail are closed during normal school hours. I know school's been closed for a long period of time, and we have allowed residents to walk anytime during the day. But now that school is back in session, we can't have community members on the track while our phys ed classes or recess are out there. So those spaces are closed during school hours. The wellness trail opens as soon as school lets out. The track is open as well, as long as there's no sporting activities going on. And as has been our policy for a long time, field use continues to be by permit only. And then we anticipate the start of varsity sports, those that are running this fall, will resume beginning Tuesday, September 29th. Then a couple other quick updates. Our emergency plans, both the district and building safety plans, have been updated in the process of being uploaded to the state. We had our school pictures underway. Elementary school, we're taking them outside. That might become a new tradition. Back to school nights are actually, one is currently underway as we speak. So those have gone virtual, but we want to make sure that we still provide parents with an opportunity to check in with their teachers. So back to school night, virtual back to school nights are underway and will continue next week. Our high school had their financial aid night. And then my last public service announcement is just to be on the lookout for information from the Putnam Valley Education Foundation on some of their socially distant activities or events that they have coming up. That's it. Thank you.
Jeremy, just related to the opening of school, how are the buses and traffic doing?
Sure. So from a transportation side, this is probably the smoothest the opening has been, at least for the last couple of years. So I did commend our transportation company for, we changed routes, we increased the number of buses, we had all these rules in place, and despite all those changes, we seem to have a pretty smooth opening of school from a transportation side. We anticipated increased traffic at all our buildings for drop-off and pickup. It's less of an issue on this campus, given the fact that 50% of the students aren't here in any day. So even if it's a 100% increase in pickup, it still doesn't exceed what we would typically deal with.
Right.
So there has not been a lot of issues here. We've refined our dismissal process for the buses to get the buses out and other things like that. The elementary school is, we knew was going to be a challenge, but I think we continue to refine our practices. It requires a tremendous amount of resources and staffing. Our teaching assistants, if they're not bringing students out to the buses, they're working they're working to help dismiss the students who are being picked up by the parents. There's staff in the driveway. Thankfully, it hasn't rained in like 2 weeks, so nobody's out there in the pouring rain. I'll probably get evil looks the first time it rains. But there was one downpour during dismissal, I remember very well. But the processes are going well, I think. It's by 2:45, we're pretty well, all the buses are out of the elementary school, and we're a good way through the parent pickup traffic. So I don't know if we have any other options. We're using 2 lines of traffic for parents to get them off of Oscowana Lake Road. We're prioritizing the buses to get them out of the way. We have our SRO officer, Deputy Miri, over there to control traffic, as well as our SPO at that building. So we sort of have all the assets available to us over there to make that process as smooth as possible. At the end of the day, it's one driveway, one way in, one way out, and we can only accommodate so many cars at once.
That sounds good.
I have a couple of questions. Can you give us insight on how Mondays look for the middle and high school with the virtual?
Sure. So on Mondays in the middle school and the high school, 100% of our students are remote. So those students still follow their typical school day. So the teachers are in the buildings, they're in their classrooms, there's no students there, but the teachers are here and teaching from their classrooms, and they're teaching to 100% of their students remotely. Those students are following their typical schedule, and they're involved in a variety of synchronous and asynchronous activities throughout the school day. For those employees who are not directly working with students, so some of our monitors, we move over to the elementary school to provide them with additional support. Obviously, on Monday at the elementary school is a typical day where all the students are in. So we're using those additional staff members over there to provide some relief for our elementary school colleagues. It's a great opportunity for us to do professional development, to hold meetings, to do the other things that require additional resources or staffing. And that's the one day a week where we have the opportunity to provide that without additional fees or expenses.
If a teacher is absent on a Monday, how's how do we do substitutes for that?
Yep,
Or
so-
do we do, or?
So we established a protocol. Ms. Mistretta together a protocol for how we're going to deal with students who are absent on Monday, teachers that are
teachers,
absent
right.
on Mondays.
Right.
So if a teacher is absent on a Monday, they should notify their students in their class, or the parents, obviously depending upon the age. And their responsibility is to provide those students with like asynchronous activities. It doesn't really make sense for us to hire a substitute teacher to teach a virtual class. They don't need to be there for classroom management and supervision. So really what our push right now is for the teacher to assign the students with asynchronous activities so we don't have to backfill that class on Monday with a substitute teacher. We are in the process of training some of our regular subs how to sort of effectively use the tools that we use for remote learning. So it's not to say in the future, or if we had a longer term absence, we couldn't have a sub step in and use Google Classroom and Drive and Meets. That's something we're working towards. But right now, sort of our procedure is for them to go asynchronous activities on Mondays if the teacher is not available to do live teaching.
Great, thank you. And one other question, sorry. The governor mandated the process of reporting cases. Who's responsible for that?
So I've been completing it, although Dr. Doherty and Ms. Mistretta are also available and capable of doing it. I'll try not to get into how cumbersome and time-consuming,
Yeah, can only
and
imagine.
pointless much of it is, but we are completing it on a daily basis as required, and we'll continue to do so, and hopefully they come up with some meaningful way to use that data.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Next is a report from the PTA, PTSA. Do we have anybody from the PTA, PTSA? Okay, I'd like to then open it up for public comments or questions on the listed agenda items. And Ms. Bleener, do we have any questions? Okay. All right, then I suppose we can move on to new business. Mr. Ferraro, will you start us off with number 1?
Resolved to accept the fiscal external audit report as presented to the board at this meeting, including extra classroom activity funds completed by PFK O'Connor Davies, the independent auditors for the district, and the district response corrective action plan management and representation letters for the fiscal year ending June 2020, as per document 5721, attached to the agenda and official minutes of this meeting.
Second?
Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Number 2.
Resolved to accept the internal audit report completed by Acumen Partners and the district response corrective action plan management letter on the accounts payable and purchasing audits referenced in the official minutes of this meeting as document number 58-21.
Second.
Questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Number 3.
Resolved on the recommendation of the superintendent of schools that Amy D. Gregorio be granted tenure in a teaching assistant in the Putnam Valley Central School District, effective October 31st, 2020.
Second.
Questions or comments?
So Annie and the next tenure recipient, Jen Franz, are here today. I want to thank them for coming to the board meeting, apologizing for the riveting beginning, but this is probably the most exciting part. For those who don't know, the transition from aides to teaching assistants happened several years ago, but we have a larger group of teaching assistants up for tenure later this year. I think we're going to recognize them in December, but Jen and Annie are the first 2 to receive that tenure. So as I mentioned before, having fantastic teaching assistants that are supporting those split classrooms, these are them, 2 of them. So I can't thank them enough for their time and effort and collaboration with the teachers to support our students. We asked our teaching assistants to assume very different roles in some cases than they've ever had before, and these are 2 of the many that have really stepped up to the challenge to do whatever was needed to support our students here in Putnam Valley.
Did I do the all in favor? All in favor? Aye. And should we do the other one and then clap all at once, or should we? Okay, let's do number 4.
Resolved on the recommendation of Superintendent of Schools that Jennifer Franz be granted tenure as teaching assistant in Putnam Valley Central School District effective October 31st, 2020.
Second.
Questions or comments? As you said before, so all in favor? Aye. Thank you very much, Amy. And if we ever can have a little tenure celebration, we'll bring you back for it.
You guys could skip the now illegal handshaking ceremony that normally happens after tenure.
Well, we can raise.
Air high fives or something like that. But again, thank you both. We really appreciate it.
Really appreciate it. Okay, well, see, now that was much more fun than the audit.
Maybe we should have mixed that in somewhere between audit and policy. We could have moved them up.
All right, let's now move on to appointing some more support staff.
Number 5.
Number 5.
Resolved on the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to appoint Nicolette Lisa to a probationary appointment of school monitor effective September 29th, 2020, with a probationary period of 52 weeks, September 29th, 2021, at the elementary school on step 1 of the CSEA salary schedule.
Second.
Questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Number 6.
Resolved on the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to appoint Justin Rivas, I apologize, Justin, to a probationary appointment as a school monitor effective September 21st, 2020, with a probationary period of 52 weeks, September 25th, 2021, at the elementary school on step 1 of the CSEA salary schedule.
Second.
Questions or comments? All in favor? Aye. Number 7.
Resolved on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools to appoint Kim DeVoli to a probationary appointment as a school monitor effective September 30th, 2020, as a probationary period of 52 weeks through September 30th, 2021 at the elementary school on step 1 of the CSEA salary schedule.
Second.
Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Number 8.
Resolved on the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to create a 1.0 FTE teaching assistant position at the elementary school effective October 1st, 2020, and reinstate Luciana Gianelli, currently on the PEL teaching assistant list, to the position.
Second.
Questions or comments? Ms. Doherty, I assume this is a new special education need?
Right, so this is a position that was eliminated prior to the budget year, and now it's someone who had to bring back to support a student.
All in favor?
Aye.
Number 9.
Resolved on recommendation of superintendent of schools to approve the first reading of the revisions to the Code of Conduct as per document 60/21 attached to the agenda and official minutes of this meeting.
Second.
Questions or comments?
Just as was reported before, the community has approximately 30 days to respond to this, and at our next board meeting, we will, after 30 days, we will have our second reading.
All in favor?
Aye.
Number 10.
Resolved on the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools to approve the first reading and waive the second reading of the revisions to Policy 8635, Information and Data Privacy Security, Breach and Notification, as per document number 65/21, attached to the agenda and official minutes of this meeting.
Second.
Questions or comments?
Just for, again, for the community in general, by state law, we have to have 2 readings of every policy. We can waive one if we consider it so critical that we have to have it. They give us that permission. And that is what this is being done here, as you heard. So it's only 1 reading, so this will be totally enacted as of tonight.
All in favor?
Aye.
Number 11.
Resolved on the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the 2020-21 fall coaches as per document number 64-21 attached to the agenda and official minutes of the meeting.
Second.
Questions or comments? Dr. Luke, do you want to just for the cameras, what sports are we running in the fall? For anybody who's not paying attention.
This is for field hockey.
Oh,
We're
okay.
approving the
Never mind.
varsity head coaches for field hockey and for boys and girls soccer.
Okay.
They'll be going on, and we're also approving a substitute trainer in that.
Did you get cross-country in there?
Huh?
And
And
cross-country.
cross-country.
And I missed cross-country then.
All right, good. Just
Right. It's a group sport.
all in favor?
Aye.
Number 12.
Was resolved on recommendation of Superintendent of Schools to award bid number 2020-21-3, heavy-duty maintenance vehicle to Park Ford of Mayapack, the lone bidder, in the amount of $55,547.50.
Second.
Questions or comments?
So this is a replacement vehicle for the dump truck we had that broke. It's been getting pretty sad watching the guys carry like a bucket of dirt back and forth in a little gator. So we know they definitely use the truck, and especially during the winter for plowing and sanding, salting, all that stuff. So it's definitely an emergency and something we need as soon as possible.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Moving on to the consent agenda, number 1.
Resolved on recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve consent agenda items 2 through 8 as presented to the board at this meeting.
Second.
Questions or comments?
We're approving CSE, CPSE placements. We're approving the members of the audit committee, which I previously told you. We're approving a health and welfare contract with New Rochelle School District for 3 of our students who are attending private school in New Rochelle. We're updating the substitute tutor list. We're approving the heads for all our clubs, the advisors for the various grades in the high school and middle school, and the teacher, faculty, and staff leadership teams in the 3 buildings. We're amending hours of work for 3 staff members due to that they work with students with special needs. And finally, we're approving an agreement with Presence Learning to provide teletherapy, professional development, and psychoeducational services for one of our students with special needs.
Dr. Luft, can you talk a little bit more about how the clubs are going to work in the remote situation?
So the approvals, this board meeting, we approved a lot of the leadership positions, grade level coordinators, department coordinators, those positions at the last board meeting. This board meeting, we're approving a lot of the advisories, a lot of the high school advisories, sustainability, teachers leading other teachers that we know will continue to happen. Right now, the buildings are undergoing the process of working with each of the club advisors. We're being asked to submit a plan for virtual clubs if they plan to do so. So those are not part of the agenda for this. We're not approving those now. Next meeting will likely have a list of the clubs. And like I said before, the principals are working with each of the club leaders to get an understanding for how that club will operate in a virtual environment before we approve any leaders for it.
And will there be an opportunity to assess continued attendance and enrollment? Because it may be harder for kids to want to jump in from Zoom.
So we started a couple of years ago a mid-year check-in where the clubs have to submit their timesheets and we review them. Some clubs, if they don't have enough enrollment, or drops mid-year, others at the end of the year.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
So
So
spotlight
now the
topics.
spotlight, yes.
So at the next meeting, October 8th, we have 2 spotlights already arranged. Mr. Spittle will be here to provide a facilities project update, and our elementary school administration will be here to provide an opening of schools update, and that's the October 8th meeting. We do have already scheduled for October 22nd our opening of schools update for the middle school and the high school, but I want to take this opportunity to ask the board if there was anything else they would like us to discuss at either of those meetings. Presentation.
Certainly, Mr. Spittle is a big player in the district during these days, so I'm glad he's at the next meeting.
Okay.
Just
Well,
along with the accomplishments, just any challenges that we're faced, want to make sure that that's addressed.
okay, for each of the buildings.
Right.
Okay, I'll make sure they all include that.
And David could just mention transportation, just, if any problems have developed due to the cycles and everything else.
Okay. Mo, can we make that facilities and transportation
Yes.
update? Thanks.
That's what I would recommend. Thank you.
You get on that, Mrs. Lino? Okay,
That's it, thanks.
all right, then is there anything for public comment on any topic, and I include the board in that?
I have a question. Sports. How's transportation, how are the kids that have off days getting to school for the sports?
So for all the sports, and this is consistent across the region, is the students are responsible for their own transportation back to the school for either practice or for games. We will be providing transportation to away games, and we're looking at the feasibility of having a 5:30 loop bus to go around. But I really need to get a sense of how many students would take advantage of that. I can't have the first day be 40 students out here, and I would need 2 buses to keep them socially distanced, but only have 1. Or I don't want to have a large bus and 2 kids that want to take advantage of it. So I'm working with Mr. Burrow to come up with a process to sort of survey students, have students opt into that bus, so we have a sense of what the need is for that 5:30 loop bus to bring students home after their practices.
Okay.
But transportation back to school for practices will unfortunately be on the parents.
And
And-
how, oh, go ahead.
Sorry. For anyone who missed it, Section 1 did announce that they will not be running modified sports. So 7th and 8th graders will not be running in the fall. And they want to see what happens at the varsity sports, sort of see how this all works out before they start introducing modified sports. So there's not currently a need at that level for additional transportation. It's really only the varsity sports we're looking at right now.
And how does participation look for those sports? For the 4
So
sports?
participation is understandably up. We have the opportunity, some students have the opportunity to now play 4 seasons. If you are traditionally a football player and football season is held off until at least March 1st, you have an opportunity to participate in something like soccer or cross country, where maybe you haven't ever had that opportunity before. So our numbers are up over right now. I think all the teams are at that 22 or over the 22 mark. I know that just from a transportation standpoint, Mr. Burrow was like, if we have an away game and we have 24 kids on the soccer team, we actually need 2 buses and not 1. So there'll be a trade-off for transportation costs in order to get 2 students to and from games if the size of the team, the roster remains over 22 students.
We should probably have Brian present what the kind of the athletics situation at the time, either at the next meeting or the meeting after that.
Okay, we'll add that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Any other, Ms. Polino, any questions?
We'll promise tonight the video. That's the rest.
Yeah, there's no link.
Yes, up now.
Okay.
No comment.
Okay. All right, then, at this time, I would like resolve to convene an executive session for 7 matters of the employment history of 7 particular persons, after which time no further business will be conducted.
Second.
Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much. Everybody have a good evening, a good long weekend, and if you're acknowledging the holiday, best wishes to all of you.